Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Common Good Data podcast. My name is Drew Reynolds. Today, we're going to have a fantastic conversation set up for you with Bill Crouch from BrightDot Fundraising Advisors. Bill is a fundraising expert. He has spent 40 years helping nonprofits and organizations reimagine fundraising from a transactional process to really being a catalyst for lasting change through the art of fundraising. Now, BrightDot's guiding principle that blends creativity, storytelling, and human connection with data-backed fundraising strategies. That's the idea. Bill, as a former college president and fundraising expert, he has trained leaders nationwide to create a ripple effect of generosity that fuels impact far beyond a single donation. As a published author and honorary fellow at Oxford University, Bill has done some amazing work, and his work is rooted in the belief that giving isn't just an obligation, but it is an opportunity to change lives. So I am so excited that Bill is going to be on for our interview today, really for this audience too, because I talk so much about the importance of collecting and working on data to be able to demonstrate and show impact, and how important that is for your organization, not only for learning and improving your services, but also being able to communicate that with funders and stakeholders to be able to sustain your mission. And Bill's going to help us think about making that connection, but to do so in an unconventional way, at least not maybe the way I've always thought about it, that really puts the focus not so much on what you do, but more on the person that you are building a relationship with. There are so many great lessons in this episode, and so excited that you'll get to learn from it as well. We had Roger joining on as co-host, so thrilled to have him on for that conversation. Now, after you listen to this episode, and if you're starting to ask that question, hey, how do I do this as an organization to kind of, demonstrate impact, but also build relationships with donors? How do I kind of help my organization start to think in these ways to build sustainability that is so much needed? What I'd like you to do is to go to commongooddata.com/courses, because we have a new course on Common Good Data for you to listen to and to participate in that is going to focus on this exact concept. And what is in this course, it's called Breaking the Starvation Cycle. If you are feeling like you are stuck in a starvation cycle as a nonprofit, always feeling like you're catching up, trying to ask for funds and resources to continue your work, but always feeling like you can't get ahead, this course is for you, because it's going to provide a framework to kind of break through that starvation cycle and find the kind of sustainability that your organization needs through clarity, through impact, and through fundraising. So excited for that. Check it out, commongooddata.com/courses. Now, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive into our interview with Bill Crouch. All right, welcome everybody to the Common Good Data podcast. My name is Drew Reynolds. I'm joined here with, of course, co-host Roger Suclupe, and we have Bill Crouch joining us today from BrightDot. Bill, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Beautiful day.
Awesome. Well, we're thrilled to have you on the podcast. I want to start off in this conversation talking a little bit about what you do, but also the problem that BrightDot is set out to solve. Can you talk to us a little about that?
Sure. So I was a college president for 22 years of a small private liberal arts college in Kentucky. Wonderful, wonderful opportunity. It was, of course, private school, and we built a lot of buildings on our campus, but I never got any public money to do that. It was all private fundraising that I did for 22 years. So when I decided to retire, semi-retire, I was hired to become the general manager, run the big fundraising firm in Chicago. And I did that for 2 years. But the why was different than my why. That why was to help wealthy institutions be wealthier in a lot of ways. Mine was always to help the underdog. Because being president of a small liberal arts college within 12 miles from the University of Kentucky, I always felt like I was the underdog. And I was always having to fight to raise money. So I left the firm in Chicago and decided that I wanted to find out what was the problem, the biggest problem in the nonprofit and fundraising world that I could create a team to solve. And I hired 2 PhDs in educational psychology and asked them to start researching. And while they were researching, I spent the year traveling the country interviewing top performers in all different varieties of fields. Blue Angels, PGA golf professionals, a gentleman who had a 1,200-acre farm, And I wanted to see if I could find some common ground among top performers in all different fields that I might could bring to the nonprofit world. So after a year, my team got together, the three of us got together, and they said it's really clear. The number one problem that nonprofits have in fundraising is the 16-month turnover. For 40 years, that's been the problem, and we began to focus in on what was causing the problem. We came up with three reasons that the problem exists. The first one is nobody grows up wanting to be a fundraiser, so everybody always falls into the position, and it takes about 16 months to realize I'm not suited for this. Right? This just isn't my gig. It takes about 16 months for the supervisor to realize, hey, you're not suited for this. I need to find somebody else. But the biggest challenge was that the only way you can get a raise in fundraising in the nonprofit world is usually to go to another organization. Right? And so a lot of people were leaving. So we said, what are we going to do? So that became our big problem that we wanted to solve. So we began focusing on that. And fortunately, a study came out by the Education Advisory Board where they surveyed 1,200 major gift fundraisers across the country who had been very successful to try to find out if there was a difference or something about them that was different from those who weren't successful in fundraising. And it came back and it hit it and said it absolutely. It's what they call being a curious chameleon, what we call the lack of emotional intelligence.
Mm.
So we began to realize there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And most nonprofits were hiring for knowledge and not for wisdom. And for us, wisdom is another word for emotional intelligence. And so what we did is to create a firm that was going to focus on emotional intelligence. What happened was that every place we would go, the people would love it. They say, you're right on, but that's fluff. We're not willing to pay for that, right? So we had to transition as a firm based upon that data that we were receiving we had to really focus on having fundraising results that we could lead the conversation with that then says, and the way we got these results is we trained the team in emotional intelligence. And so we're now 10 years old. We've been very successful. A large percentage of our clients have gotten the largest gifts they've ever gotten. We really now focus on high wealth fundraising due to our data, which I'll be able to explain to you in a little bit, that we feel is going to be critical for the nonprofits and higher educations. And I'm at a community college today, and community colleges are having to learn to raise money because the legislature's not going to be giving them the money they've been getting in the past. And so we're creating that. So that was the problem. And I knew as I was becoming an entrepreneur, I had to find a problem and I had to come up with a solution. And so we've created this niche, and it's really working for us.
That's amazing. I know Roger probably his brain is exploding because both of us have lots of experience in higher ed as well on the faculty side, student side, and whatnot. I'm married to a faculty member at Emory University as well. So we've got all the kind of connections and also have a real appreciation for the liberal arts as well. Going through and academia and liberal arts is also kind of going through a challenging time right now. Certainly
Sure.
some disruption in the industry.
I,
I would love to just kind of talk a little bit more about that, kind of your work. Why you certainly, what was the name of the college that you were at in Kentucky?
it was Georgetown College.
Georgetown. Yeah, absolutely. I actually had some. I grew up in Cincinnati, so we had some folks who made it down that way.
Yep, and we had the Bengals on our campus for 17 years. They're training.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that connection.
Yeah.
So I'm curious that, certainly the landscape has changed a little bit, and we'll get into some of the other things in our podcast in a second, but I just wanted to reflect a little bit. What are you seeing some of the kind of smaller colleges doing in this moment to be successful, given how much change is going on? Or what would you propose to those institutions to be thinking about in broad scopes?
That's really interesting, Drew, because we're doing a lot of work right now with these small colleges. As you know, 79 of them went out of business last year.
Yeah.
And they're predicting even more this year. And so we are having to go in there and to teach them what we call the 95-5 rule. They are focusing on the wrong people. As you know, the 80-20 rule no longer exists.
Mhm.
Right. And so most of these are set up with alumni giving, golf tournaments, all kinds of things to invite it. And it's all been about the numbers. US News and World Report is what drove this out the window a couple of years ago when they started ranking colleges.
Mhm.
And they use the percentage of alumni who give as one of their critical pieces. And so it didn't matter if they gave $5, $500, or $10,000, it counted as one.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
And so colleges really focus on getting numbers. And now the game's changed. It's not about the number of donors, it's about the amount of money that a donor gives. So
Right.
we've done a lot of work about donor advice funds, about all the different ways that these small colleges can start thinking differently about how they approach fundraising. And then I spend a lot of time coaching the presidents on how to do that, even from the importance of having personal stationery that doesn't have the college's address on it, but has their personal address on it, because we call them eagles. Eagles give to eagles. And a college president is an eagle because of their title and responsibility. They just happen to be the president of a college, but that's not what attracts high wealth people to them. What attracts them is their integrity, their wisdom, all of those type of things. So we go in and try to help the presidents rethink and say, forget about the masses. You need to focus on 10 people. 10 people, and we help identify who those 10 people are and train them up in those areas. And it's all based upon data. We have to go in and figure out who those 10 people are, et cetera, et cetera. And particularly in the community college, there's a low self-esteem. For instance, we've been working, the University of North Carolina just finished like a $5 billion campaign, and they had 363 people who gave $10 million or more. I want to know who those 363 people are. I want to know where they live and what community college they were close to, because that community college should be asking them to invest in their local community as
Right.
well as their alma mater. So that's the type of thinking we're bringing to the table.
Awesome. That's awesome. Roger, take the next one.
Wow, that's so much. This is absolutely mind-blowing. The capacity that and also the leverage that fundraising has to make or break, right? Whether it's an organization or even an academic institution. And I love how on your website it says fundraising is an art.
Right.
And you could take that in so many different ways, but it truly is an art form. Drew had mentioned currently I'm the BSW program director, still freshly new. I think I've been in this position now in this role capacity for 5 or 6 years, but there's still so much to learn, not only about student connection and engagement, but then how do you fundraise, right? How do you connect with alumni, or how do you connect with community individuals who are interested in the institution that is enveloped within the greater community. So, and then in the nonprofit world, I was also a social worker in nonprofit communities and agencies, and that within itself can be very challenging. So,
Yes.
my question really is about defining, like definition. How do you define impact in a fundraising context, and how should nonprofits align their fundraising strategies around those definitions?
Well, as I mentioned, I travel around the country interviewing top performers, and I still do that. Whenever I go meet with a top performer, I only ask them one question. And that question varies depending on who I'm going to see. So 3 years ago, I got to an appointment with the wealthiest man in North Carolina, who will remain anonymous. But I went to him and I told him I only have one question I'd like to ask you. And he said, okay. And I promised him I'm not coming to ask you for money. So when I got to him and we did our ice breaking, I said, here's my question. Would you teach me to think like a wealthy person? And he looked at me and said, nobody's ever asked me that before. And he said, I have 10 or 12 of these fundraisers who come to see me every month. And I'm always thinking the same thing. And I said, great, that's what I want to know. What are you thinking so I can help solve this problem for them? He said, I'm thinking how stupid they are. And I said, why would you say that? And he said, because it's always about them and their nonprofit and never about me. He said, for instance, did you know that every wealthy person loves art and music? He said, I love contemporary art, and his office was full of contemporary art. And he says, I love classical music, and classical music was playing from the ceiling. And he said, no development person should ever go see any donor of high wealth without knowing what art and music they love. And he said, so one day, he said, Bill, this has never happened, but one day somebody's going to walk into my office with a proposal. And on the cover of the proposal is going to be a Monet. And on the second page is going to be words from a Mozart cantata. And what that's immediately going to say to me is, you know who I am. This is about my needs, my desires, what I want to accomplish, not about what that building is that you want to build. And so one of the things that we've learned is that we're having to teach our clients how to do good research. It's gotten a lot easier, AI, thank you. But how to incorporate that in the first time they ever meet a donor, to let the donor know. So one other real quickly, I interviewed a gentleman who owned a series of funeral homes across the country. And I asked him if I could come see him to ask him one question. And when I got there, I said, is there anything that you've learned in the funeral home business that you could teach me that I could teach nonprofits that would make them more efficient and effective? And he said, absolutely. He said, Bill, whenever somebody comes in to prepay their funeral, they're only asking one question. And when a family comes in to pick out a coffin, they're only asking one question. And the question's the same thing. And I said, well, what is the question? And he said, they're asking, does my life matter? Does that dot between the dates on my tombstone, does that dot matter? And he said, where the nonprofit world is screwed up is you always focus on the people you're serving and that they matter. But what you need to be doing is saying to the donor the first time you meet them, hey, you matter. You've done this and this and this and this in your life, and you matter. And because you matter, we'd like you to consider a relationship with us so that we can help these children that we're serving grow up with lives that matter. And boy, has that been magical. That has totally transformed the way we're teaching. So we're saying, do away with stewardship language. It's all transactional. Go to using mattership language that is relational, right? And then you're going to be able to really impact the lives of both the donor, because we always talk about the impact on the people we serve. But he taught me, this funeral home director taught me, said, talk to them about the impact their lives have made before you ever met them, right? And so you taught Sunday school for 25 years. You were chairman of the Rotary Club that did this. Show them the impact their life has made before you start talking to the impact their gift can make on the people you serve. So that's what we do. And
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just had a thought in my head. Investment is a two-way street.
exactly.
Right? So there's the investment that the individual is making into a community, right, with their donation, their gift. Then there's the investment the organization or the nonprofit leader is making in finding out about the individual as well. So it's
Right.
like a synchronous dance.
It's right. And then the emotional intelligence comes in with the ability to listen, to listen to the donor, talk about their desires, their hopes, etc.
I love that concept of mattership. Drew and I, uh, a lot of our conversations end up focusing around relationships and the importance of relationships in not only nonprofit world, but just in general as individuals, as social workers. Drew and I know that's an important tool that we have in our toolbox, right? How do you make a connection with somebody? Well, there's vulnerability that's involved, but there's also trust, and in order to gain that trust, you have to be willing to develop a relationship that starts with, basics and simplicity, right? What are your interests? Oh, we have similar interests, or just things like that. Does that make sense?
So one question, and Roger, I want you to answer this question for me. One
Oh
question
dear.
we get all of our clients to ask the first time they meet with a high wealth donor. We want them to ask this question. So Roger, tell me what your favorite childhood toy was.
Oh, whoa. Several, but I would say, and Drew, this is going into our pop culture. We're going backwards here, right?
I
But
think
no.
this might have to be our pop culture question. Yeah,
Okay, you know what? We we'll go that route. So
Okay.
there were several, but one of my favorite ones, and I've already talked about this on a previous episode, is was Voltron. And Voltron was a five lions that uh, got together and created Voltron. So each particular lion had their own strength, right?
Yeah.
But even though they independently uh, were out, fighting, whoever it was they had to fight for that episode. When they got together at Voltron, that's when they became like a unit, a powerful unit.
So Roger, what we do at our organization is we have kids who have such strong potential and they all have strength in various ways they can do it. But what we try to do is to show them the power of a team and we try to bring them together and we try to help them create these new ways to live their lives. And so what we do by asking that question, the first thing it does is allow us to see the joy spot in a person's life. Because all we're trying to do is get to a person's heart.
Mm.
Right? And then we listen to their vocabulary. And then when we go to 3, 4 visits later, when we go with the proposal, we only use their vocabulary that we learned from the answer they gave to that question. So it really is how we're able to use this whole emotional intelligence ability to have results. So, and typically we couldn't see you, unfortunately, but typically when I ask that question, they smile
Oh,
and
I
then
lit up.
they start talking with their hands.
I did that too. Drew knows me.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I know exactly what Roger's doing on the other side.
So,
But I love that question, and it is just fantastic because it just unlocks so many different kind of things. And it's also what's great about these questions. What is your favorite childhood toy, or tell me how to think like a wealthy person. These are questions that people don't anticipate when they're having a conversation with a fundraiser. It's kind of comes out, they're like, oh, I didn't expect this. I expected, talk a little bit about your mission and how maybe it connects, and you kind of flip the script a little bit, whereas all of a sudden it isn't about you and your work. So I have, well, there's two things I wanted to share here. One, too, is that because Roger and I are both social workers and we teach
as am
class.
I, by the way.
No way.
Yeah, I
What
was a
is
soci- I
How
was
did I
this?
a
miss that when I was
sociology
researching you?
I
What
was
is
a sociology
happening? This is
major at Wake
awesome.
Forest.
You were a social work major at Wake Forest?
I was a sociology
Oh,
major at Wake Forest. Yeah,
okay.
and
Awesome.
and
That is amazing.
that was my mission to become a college president, is to take my social why, my calling,
Yeah.
to a higher level.
Oh man. Well, then you'll appreciate this because we talk about in classes in social work about Erickson's stages of development. And for a lot of people in the middle adulthood and late adulthood, what the focus is really on is around generativity, thinking about what is going to be my legacy, what's going to last beyond me, and what does my life mean, and how can I make that something that's real in the world. And I feel like that's probably an age group too that you're having lots of conversations with when you're talking with high net worth individuals. So I was like, oh wow, there's actually like a psychology connection to this too. Which, anyways,
So we have, by the way, we have a performance psychologist on our team.
Hmm.
And so she's constantly helping us think through those type things as before we go talk to donors. So
amazing.
Bill, you know who else you need on your team? And Drew knows who I'm getting ready to say. You need a social worker. I'm just, I'm always trying to embed social workers into every capacity of society and community. But
So Mike Carter, who's one of our team members, is a PhD in social work. And then he's all the time coming forth with all these studies and things that we use to collect the data we're looking for.
That is amazing. Well, I have a next question, and I realize early how the conversation has gone. I might have to tweak it a little bit because one thing we try to do in the work that I do at Coming Good Data is work with organizations to kind of put their best foot forward when they're talking about the impact of their work. So whether it's getting kind of the kind of data that they need on their programs and services to be able to show who they are and what they do, helping to be able to craft that story in meaningful ways. So I want to talk a little bit about that from your perspective, because what I was going to ask you is to say, what advice would you give to nonprofits as they're putting that information together? What do you find are the kinds of stories or metrics that are the most meaningful? But I'm realizing that's also a little bit about the nonprofit and not about the donor. So
Yeah,
I'm just gonna put it out there and say you can challenge my question and that assumption if you
sure.
want to, but give some
Nope,
idea,
nope.
advice for nonprofits on
I
this.
think I think your assumption's right, and we've done a lot of research, and I know that there's a lot of different kind of research, but we really focus on helping the development people understand the difference between left brain and right brain, and trying to understand before we go see somebody where they are. So some of the questions we ask early on is trying to figure out, are they data driven? We call it objective judgment. Um, I'm on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm a 2 when it comes to objective judgment in terms of being led by my emotions. My wife's a 10, right? The first time we went to buy a car together, we almost got divorced. We approached it two totally different ways. It
Yeah.
took me about 10 minutes to decide I wanted that car. She wanted to go test drive 5 cars first. So we brought that knowledge to us because every nonprofit has both, and 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 you can't create data. You can't create an impact report just using data without the stories, right? And the stories have to be able to get to the heart of the right brain people, and the data gets to the heart of the left brain people. So we always combine the two together, and we do it in a variety of ways. But the most important way we've done it is the video storybook. And instead of printing a beautiful 10-page impact report or annual report, as it used to be called, we've combined it all into a video book that I'll send you one, Drew, so you can
Yeah,
see,
that'd be great. We'll put it on our notes.
because it has a place for you to insert data. But when you open up the book, there's a video up by a child who is being served or whatever, because we know with high wealth people, visuals work better than data in a lot of places. So we combine the two together. And we think that's really, really important. And we think the collateral that's used is critical. So I'm in Sky Clubs a lot, and I always grab every single magazine on the magazine rack because they're all focused on high wealth individuals, right? Because the purpose of a Sky Club is to give poor guys like me a chance to get a free glass of wine. But the main purpose is to make high wealth people who can buy first class tickets feel really special, right? So we take those magazines and go through and look at the advertisements in them. And we go to our team, our clients, and say, use this philosophy. So it's big, powerful adjectives, pretty pictures, and then data, bullet points of data. Right? Because the most valuable thing a high wealth person has is time. It's their time, not their money.
Right.
Right. And they don't read paragraphs. They read that. They don't necessarily read numbers. So your bullet points have to be data, but they can't be overwhelmed by a whole list of numbers, right? And so this has been a powerful thing. And we think that every successful fundraising operation also is made up of left brain, right brain people, and it's rare, rare, rare that somebody's equal in both sides, right? And so we try to make sure they're hiring for the right purposes. But this data piece and the impact piece go hand in hand. It's just figuring out how the receiver's going to receive it, not how you want it to look. And we see, a marketing staff at a team wants it to look pretty and all that kind of stuff, but that might not be what the receiver wants to get. So it's challenging, but those impact reports are critical.
I love that. Drew, do you remember, this reminds me of when we interviewed Matt Pearl and the utilizing, visual journalism, right? So storytelling through videos and sort of like this, not that we're moving away from impact reports and all that, but but we are leaning into the utilization of creative ways to like video telling. I guess I'm not sure if I just made a new word there, but like so video telling,
Yeah.
because visually, we like things that are visually pleasing, but then also hearing a story and then making that connection. And Matt Pearl is a guest a few episodes back, and a reporter. He's an author. He's a storyteller, and he talked about that utilization of video. Um, and yeah, that just reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
But
had I've started to do that with my clients as well. But I'm a lot of times my job is to put together a big impact report. But I always say there's also going to be a 2 minute video that you can put online, and we'll have different pieces in there. And sometimes it's like slow it down a little bit because I want to read all the details. I was like, if you want to read the details, there's an annual impact report. This is a 2 minute video, and it will finish in 2 minutes.
that's
It's kind of
great.
the approach to do it. I'm going to take one more, and then Roger's going to do our culture question. But can you just talk to us a little bit about what are you seeing as the next big challenge in nonprofit sector fundraising? What is it that people maybe aren't thinking about that is coming on the horizon that people should be paying attention to as they're thinking about raising funds for their organization?
We just did a webinar last week with 34 different colleges, and we said for the next 3 months, forget about doing a year-end mailing that you've typically done. Go look at everybody over the age of 70 and send a personal letter to them asking them for their donor advised fund contribution. The donor advised funds is where the future is.
Mhm.
Uh, and there's $278 billion right now sitting in banks that has already been given, and the donors already been given their tax receipt, and it's just sitting there. And 92% of it is um, unrestricted. The donor hasn't decided where to send that money. And all nonprofits have donors who have that, and the people over 70 particularly. And if they're over 70, they can give away their IRA, their restricted contribution, as a tax-free piece. And most donors are just don't know that that's there. So we think that. We think the key to that is building relationships with wealth managers and banks. So um, and to treat the wealth manager or bank as if they are $1 million donor. They're never going to tell you who their clients are, but if they fall in love with your mission, they're going to turn around and go to their clients who have donor advised funds and say, hey, I think you ought to consider giving some of your advised fund to this nonprofit. And so we call that the Barbara approach. And it's about finding connectors and building relations with connectors who can open doors for you. We call them eagles. In biology, an eagle never does its work with sparrow's nest, right? A sparrow, all nonprofits are run by sparrows. They're wonderful people. God says it's his favorite bird in the Bible. But there are people who will go to meetings every month, who will sit there for 2 hours and listen to staff make reports, who will get in an argument about whether to spend $1,000 to buy a computer for somebody there, and then they'll make a gift of $1,000 and buy a table at a gala, right? But they're all looking for an eagle. An eagle is a person who hates meetings, who could care less about $1,000 expenditure, uh, who likes to hang out with people like them who go to private airports to get their trips. Uh,
Right.
and so what we've said is you have to have two boards. The future is two boards. You got to have your governing board made up of sparrows, but you got to have an eagle board, which in the past was called the Capital Campaign Executive Committee.
Right. Yep.
The capital campaigns, I think, are a thing of the past because you're never not going to be in a campaign.
Right. They're always building, especially with
You're
colleges, right?
going to always be it. So don't gear up every 4 years. Just maintain that type of approach, and I think that's the future for these nonprofits.
Oh man, with some great wisdom here. Thank you so much, Bill. Roger, let's take it home with our culture question here.
Before I do, I actually want to know if you can share briefly about the BrightDot nonprofit mentorship program. I
Yeah.
think it's a really important concept. I feel like our listeners, um, could get some good wisdom about these types of programs.
So we have excellent trained experts. So for instance, we our legacy program is headed by Lorraine King, who was one of the creators of the Plain Giving program at St. Jude's Hospital. And so if you're interested in your legacy program, then Lorene becomes your mentor to help you set it up. Allison Gilbert, who was the chief fundraiser, one of the major top fundraisers at NC State for 10 years, takes the people who are interested in growing in their major gift fundraising, and she takes them through a process, all tied into emotional intelligence and being resilient and being good time managers and spending your time on the must things that you must get done. So it combines emotional intelligence, it combines time management, it defines focus, and it creates a process that is 3 to 6 months, where we're coaching one-on-one that individual and providing the mentorship. And we have it in annual fund. We have it in all areas of fundraising. And I work strictly with presidents, and we have a president's cohort that I always have 4 presidents at a time that we're mentoring together, so that they can learn from each other. And it's the real joy for us, because all of my team is wide people. Our goal is to impact 100 million lives in the next 10 years through the ripple effect of our work. And so it's all about our why, which I think has something to do with social work.
Absolutely. There's so many connections here. So you're a Charlottean, right? So that's one connection. You had mentioned Allison was over at NC State.
Yep.
My son is a sophomore at NC State,
Okay.
he's construction engineering. So wow, all these connections here. So that I was gonna go one route with my culture question, but I'm actually gonna keep it Charlotte. So let's no, I know, Drew, you're not a Charlottean. I'm not either, actually. I wasn't born in Charlotte, but I've been around Charlotte enough to go back to some things related to the 80s and 90s. And so
Yep.
usually my culture questions are around the 80s and 90s because that's the best. Just me, it's just me, but 80s and 90s were the best decades ever. So I'm just going to leave it there. We may have some listeners who say otherwise, but so my question is, and I'll start us off, right? Is can you think of an 80s or 90s, and I'm not going to say childhood, but just 80s or 90s era landmark or memory from Charlotte? So I'll go first. I'm going to pick. I remember when I was traveling down, I went to App State, and we would come down to Charlotte every now and then. And I, I mean, let's put this in context, right? I'm in college, so
Yep.
I'm 18, 19, 20.
Yep.
There was a venue called the Pterodactyl Club, and we would just go there, and it was like a dance venue. So we would go, and I remember just going to the Pterodactyl. It's a small little venue. It's not there anymore. Actually, I think Pinky's Grill and Cafe and some other nice stuff is there. But yeah, I just remember going. I remember we would make the drive from Boone down to Charlotte, go to this little venue. It's really small, and then head back. So just kind of think it in context of those types of
So,
memories.
so I have a lot of them, but the one that I that pops to my mind was my father was the pastor of the Providence Baptist Church, large church, which when we moved there in '69 was out in the country, but now it's South Park, all that place. But George Shin was a member of his church, and George Shin had decided to bring an NBA team to Charlotte in the early '90s.
Yes.
And he wanted my father to be the chaplain of the Hornets. And so Dad did a Bible study or devotional before every home game in the locker room. And I often got to go with him. So I sat next to Michael Jordan. I sat next to Dell Curry while his 2 sons were out shooting basketball right before a game. And so that whole becoming a professional athletic city
Mhm.
happened in that era.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I got an inside view of the Hornets because of the role that my father played in knowing Mr. Shin.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's cool. So definitely Charlotte Coliseum, a much bigger venue than the small Pterodactyl Club. Drew, Drew, I know I felt, well, I know we
Oh,
try to be
I got an answer to
inclusive.
this. You're all
Okay,
good.
you do? Cool,
Yeah.
go.
So I wasn't in Charlotte. I grew up in Cincinnati, which is also known as the Queen City. So we have a
Right.
Cincinnati Charlotte connection in that regard. But I
Yeah.
have a great memory when I was living in Charlotte for a couple years while I was teaching at UNC Charlotte, of taking my girls to their first baseball game, which was a Charlotte Knights game. And we just like, hey guys, this is what baseball is. And you can imagine, like, they were like 1 and 3 years old or something like that at the time, and we just basically hung out in the outfield grass area or whatever, just rolling around on the ground. There was not much baseball watched, but it was a very cool moment for me to have a memory of going to a sports game and taking them to see first baseball ever. So we're coming up on the World Series here, so it's kind of a good stop.
So related to that, Drew, one of the things that we use a lot when we talk about the art of fundraising, we show videos of Savannah bananas.
Oh man, they're so good. You gotta love Savannah bananas. They're a hit. The best minor league
We
marketing
think of
ever.
ourselves as the Savannah bananas of fundraising
That's
because
a good
we're
analogy.
trying to bring fun and joy into what has not been a very joyful place in many ways for nonprofits. So we're trying to bring that to the forefront.
What a great analogy to wrap it up with. Bill, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate all the wisdom that you're going to share. I can't wait to share this with our audience. If people want to learn more about BrightDot, where can they find you?
You go to thebritdot.com. Just type in thebritdot.com and you will get our website, and we'd love to talk to you and set up an appointment.
Wonderful. Well, we thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Common Good Data podcast, and look forward to all the conversations that'll be happening online about this great interview. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Enjoyed
Bill.
it.